And I'd like to invite up our older brother again, Reverend David Hanna, to be able to give us a message titled Heavenly Heart, Sacred Place. So let's invite him up with a round of applause.
Good morning again, everybody. Well, good afternoon, actually. Very good. Thank you. I wanted to share some thoughts today. It's a little more like an illustrated talk. Maybe somebody would say this is not a sermon, but I felt to tie some of the ideas that we've been sharing today together, including that very wonderful film gives a good summary, right, of what is coming in the next week. So I think it was very good for us to see that. Okay, yeah. So, title is Heavenly Heart and Sacred Space. Here we go. Well, this picture here is probably the kind of scene that the majority of people since the dawn of time have seen, right? That's what they've looked out on. This is the plains of Africa. And, a very, very typical scene for the majority of people. I'm not sure if it helps to have the light off, but if the front ones can go down, that might be good. So this gave rise to kind of way of interpreting and understanding the human condition and situation and the language which became used in religion, especially. So the sky became synonymous with heaven and all things good, and the earth became kind of used and synonymous with all things bad. Although that's a bit unfair, isn't it? I mean, sky is good, earth is bad. It's all good, actually, in terms of God's creation. So, but the sky is there. It's very beautiful color. It gives us our, sunlight and warmth, and rain comes for the crops, and everything comes freely. This is really God's grace. So it's become synonymous with heaven because, if you wanted to reach up and grab it, you can't do that. You can't take a handful of sky. But if you were to stick your hand, different set of words to describe things which are maybe unclean or, this kind of idea. So earth became kind of idea behind it was something of impurity. But then people, going way, way back, almost every culture that you come across in every time separated out some of this earth, some area to be sacred or to be holy, like set aside with a special feeling. You had to be very reverent. You had to be feeling you're coming into the awesome presence of God when you go there. So maybe it just meant you take your shoes off when you go into that circle which you've made in the ground. And you'll find these kind of places. This is actually Native American. It's called a medicine wheel. And some of these survive. And if you're not feeling well internally, spiritually things aren't going well for you, or if you have some physical difficulty, you can go there and you can meditate there and spend some time there in the medicine wheel, and you'll get some healing. So it's a place of healing, and it's simply marked out in this way and survives for people to use repeatedly. Here's another holy place. This is actually Mount Kailash. Now, Mount Kailash is in Tibet, and it looks very tempting if you're a climber, right? But nobody's climbed this. Why? Because it's a holy mountain, and therefore you don't climb it. But you can do a pilgrimage. You can walk around a 32-mile pilgrimage around the base of the mountain. It takes people 1 month to do. And why does it take them so long? Take a whole month? because as you go along, you do full bows along the way, right? So it takes some time. So people, single out even places like this to offer their devotion and to really pay some indemnity in our unificationist language, right? And feel that, you're coming somewhere into a holy presence. And I imagine, turning the corner and seeing that, you'd gasp, actually. You'd think, how beautiful, how amazing is God creating this place. There are different expressions of this kind of holiness. If you go to Japan, you'll find something like this, the Golden Temple in Kyoto. It's a different kind of beauty, isn't it, right? But again, a kind of holiness with a lot of investment into crafting this out of wood with most beautiful materials and gold overlay and beautifully organized gardens, very, very expertly laid out and cared for. Very peaceful place. You want to go there, right, and just have a think. And the other side of Kyoto, you get some gardens. This is the Tofukuji Temple. And this caused quite a stir when it first came out, because it's quite a modern treatment. And people thought, oh, this is no good. This isn't how a garden should be. But it had a philosophy behind it. So if you go there, you can see on the left, it's the more ordered universe that we kind of put our stamp on. And then it fades out into the kind of natural disorder of nature. And the two kind of flow into one another. So again, a very beautiful place to go and think and meditate and to take some little time out. So every country, every culture, every place, every time has these. This is a temple in Vietnam. But in a country like Vietnam, and it's really quite random examples today, and I'm not looking for the best or the greatest, just to see how people treat space as something very holy or sacred. In Vietnam, there are over 15,000 temples and pagodas. And some, like this, are built in quite impossible places to reach, right? And you have to take all the materials up there, which already is difficult, so it shows even more devotion, doesn't it? To build it in such a place is requiring so much devotion, and when you go there, even to get there, requires devotion, and then you can really feel, I'm closer to God at the top of this mountain. So here's another very impressive building. I don't know if you know where this is, just outside Delhi. This is the main temple, or so-called lotus temple of the Baha'i faith. Very beautiful. You see the lotus flower image of the building reflected in the water pool in front, and very inviting, especially in a really hot weather, I'm sure. You want to go in there and experience the coolness of God. Right? How about this? Where would you find this? You have to go all the way to Neasden in North London, right? This is the Swaminarayan Hindu temple in North London. I think the skies give it away, actually. But I remember taking a party of school children there. It was very, very wonderful, actually. And they were very welcoming and a beautiful experience. And they told us all about how it was made, everything carved in blocks and brought over and assembled by craftsmen in Neasden. So every country, every part of the United Kingdom has its own holy places. This is St. Patrick's Purgatory. If you go to Loch Derg in County Donegal in Ireland, then this is counted as probably the most holy site in Ireland, because St. Patrick was a saint, or is a saint for all Ireland, north and south. They both respect Patrick in that position. So they're actually weekend retreats that you can go on. You have to pay quite a lot of money to go on these retreats. And it starts with a walk around the lake all night, and you do a 24-hour fast. So I thought maybe we should start something like indemnitours or something, and gives people some really good, because people are actually looking for this. They don't want to just go to a fancy hotel and be looked after. No, I want to go and do something on my inner life and sort myself out and reconnect with God. So this is a place to do it. And here's another place in Scotland. This is Iona in the Inner Hebrides. Okay, one more picture. Where is this? This is Watford, yes, Peace Garden. So our brothers and sisters having a hand in building this and making this together with the local community and Interfaith, Watford Interfaith, etc. And they made a maze here, which is a kind of progressive, meditative experience. You know, you can walk around it or go on your knees maybe, and you'll find these in some medieval cathedrals as well. It means that somewhere concentrating, and that helps me to connect and disassociate it with things of the world and connect with God. Buddhist monks have a practice of meditation where you take your bowl, your silver bowl, and you fill it absolutely almost to the top with water, and then you walk, and you mustn't spill a drop. At the same time, you can be meditating, right? So a wonderful kind of concentrating on the physical and the spiritual at the same time. So sacred space, is there, and it's, as I said, in every culture, in every time in history. If we go to the kind of anthropologists, the academics who study these things, it's interesting to see that it's fairly agreed upon that wherever you find it, sacred space works in a certain way. There's a way you can say, well, this is sacred space. It works this way. Or if you see something identified, whether it's a holy ground, it's marked out in the earth, or it's a stone, or it's a great cathedral, it'll still work in this same way. It acts in their language, in the academic language, as a center or as a central point. And it's something that the community can unite around. It also feels like a center around which things revolve spiritually. It's also a meeting point, not only for people, but between the spiritual and the physical realms. They come together at this place. So that's why there's sometimes a lot of physical detail and attention paid to them. At the same time, it's very awesome and ethereal, and you feel absolutely going into the presence of God in that place. Also, they are recognized as being a microcosm. So these sacred spaces represent all things and contain all things. I was interested to watch a guided tour of the main chapel in Maynooth, which is the Catholic seminary in Ireland, produces all the Irish Catholic priests. And around that building, there's so many, on the inside, there's a whole ring of sculpture, which is all carved animals around the world. Almost every animal you can find there. Monkeys, kangaroos, all kinds of things. Why? Because you're going into a building which represents the whole of God's creation. So it's all there. So as well as just thinking about God and those higher things, you're thinking about the beautiful world of creation as well that God made. So the fourth point that's kind of recognized in academic circles is that sacred space acts as an immanent, transcendent presence. Well, that's a bit verbose, isn't it? It means, God is with us and in us. He's very close to us and very near us. And also he's above everything, is greater than the universe. And it's an extraordinary paradox. It's very difficult for the human mind to get around that one. So why does God care about me? And yet I feel that he does. And yet God is also the creator of the universe, which is vaster than I can imagine. So there is this presence, something very real and personal, and something transcendent above all other things. In Exodus, you might have been reminded a few times during this 40 days of God's words there, "Let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." And really this is a precursor to the famous words by Kevin Costner, if you come across him, in the Field of Dreams film. if you build it, he will come. Amen? Jew, if you build it, he will come. And that was the theme of that movie. But God was already saying this a long time ago. If you build it, I will be there. And of course, it's an interesting debate. Is God contained in a building? No. But, if you build that building, you can feel the presence of God there more strongly than anywhere else. So it's an interesting process of these two kind of coming together, and those 4 points which I outlined there. So this sanctuary develops, of course, in the Old Testament times with the tabernacle, and the model of this, the way that it's designed becomes the model for the temple when it's built substantially. And here it is. It has the most holy place, which has that kind of cover on it there, and Moses would go in there, and just Moses, and he'd have a question, and he'd encounter the Spirit of God and receive an answer and come out and tell Aaron, and Aaron would tell the people. And, this was how this kind of process of being in touch with God's will and God's judgment was really put into effect in the time of Moses, and he could carry out his leadership effectively during that time. And priests would offer sacrifices for atonement if people have made mistakes and done things they shouldn't have done, etc. So that would happen, but you'd have to go with a very repentful heart and a very kind of, it would be quite a public thing to see you going to make your sacrifice. Well, in the unification principle, I'm sure you've come across this. It's a very interesting little, I say revelation actually, because I haven't read this anywhere else. It says that the tabernacle and the temple are actually a symbolic Messiah. So it's a symbolic Messiah. What does that mean? Well, for a start, it means that when people are learning how to treat this tabernacle and then the temple with a great deal of reverence, and they're attending this holy object which is containing the most holy objects, and they're making it the center of their faith, it means that all that devotion and that love should be transferred to the Messiah when the Messiah comes. This is already, saying that, Jesus should never have been rejected or put to death, or, that this was never in God's plan. Rather should be accepted and should work in place and taking over from that work of the function of the temple in society, and should stand as the center of their life. Actually, just prior to the coming of Jesus, the temple would look like this. Again, this is a model, but a 3D model. And it went through some real renovations and improvements about 15 to 20 years before Jesus' birth. Getting ready for what? I would think for Jesus' coming, actually. So, and we could say that the temple should have functioned much more in the life of Jesus, although he felt obviously a kind of identity with the temple. He referred to himself as the temple. And actually, this temple at the time of Jesus was already being kind of defiled or not treated properly or with the respect that it should have, especially in Jesus' eyes. And that's why I had us read the story of Hanna. And it's a very touching story, isn't it? It's really beautiful because Hanna, for many years, she can't have a child. Was it 19 years or something? So she goes to Eli the priest and has him pray with her. Says, can you pray with me? Can you pray that I can have a child? And then she has a child. And because at the time of making that prayer, she said, and I will dedicate this child to the Lord, then she doesn't go to make the regular annual offering with her husband and other children, but she wants to wait until she has breastfed this child so that she can take him to, we say, the temple. I mean, it's not the physical temple, but it's called the house of the Lord there. So it's using the same language. It goes to this place for religious training and offers him, gives him back to God. So it's such a heart of gratitude, isn't it? You know, you would think after having such a request fulfilled, you'd hang on to that child, you know, at the price of your own life. But she wants to give this child back into God's service and does it with gratitude. And the husband also is very accepting of that. If you want to do this, you should do it, right? It's a very beautiful little story right there. So that's the story of Hannah. But who is that child? Grows up to be Samuel. And Samuel is brought up in that religious environment. And he becomes, of course, the last of the judges and the one to anoint Saul as the first king of Israel, the united Israel kingdom there. So just thinking around that topic, you can imagine then maybe there was a precedent there, even for Mary and the baby Jesus. She knew this was a miraculous child, really given by God. Perhaps she could have taken him to the temple and thought it would be better if he were brought up by the priests and the learned people there. And of course, then he would have his, not only place to teach, but suite of rooms where people and foreign visitors eventually would come and would receive the teaching of Jesus. And he could live and work out of that central place. And the temple would fulfill its purpose, and it would have in its heart the Messiah. But we don't hear anything like that happening, because even though in the story of Simeon and Anna it's very much a kind of recognition of people in the temple that this child is special, he's brought there and he's taken away again, right? And it doesn't become his place. So Jesus entered the temple courts, really the final time, was on his way to his eventual death in Jerusalem in Easter week. And when he got to the temple, he began to drive out those who were selling there and overturning the tables of the money changers and doing other acts like that. So really showing his displeasure at the way that the temple was not being used in the way that it should. And he began to teach them, and he declared, "Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations?" And I love the way that that's in the plural. It's for all nations. It's not just for Israel. But you have made it a den of robbers, right? So you've really misused it. Okay, so do you remember those 4 points that we had from the anthropologist talking about sacred space? In Divine Principle, it talks about a true person, and that was the first of the readings that we had today, right? And what does it say there? It gives 4 points for, what is a true person, their position in the cosmos as relates to the physical and spiritual world. The first is they're a ruler of the universe. That means they can actually be subject over both of these realms, and therefore in the center of those realms. And they can be a mediator. That means they're there to act as the kind of medium through which spiritual world and physical world can communicate. And even God can't, directly have dominion over the physical world, but needs the agent of human beings who are both spirit and body to be able to do that. That's our unique position. And then such a person is a microcosm, a substantial model then of the whole cosmos. They're there. Each one of you is a little model of the entire universe, spiritual world and physical world. And we all marvel at God's creation of the physical world, right? So many sermons on that. But we have not to forget that God made the spiritual world as well, and that's even more amazing, more than we can understand until we go there, right? So, 4th point is that such a person, such a true person, is a center of harmony between the spiritual world and physical worlds. Well, do you know that the Divine Principle mentions tuning forks? You all know what tuning forks are, right? I never go anywhere without one, right? Bit of a device there. So, this is one reason God made knees. Goes on a long time, doesn't it? When you strike that, it produces a long note. Still going. Is it going to stop? Eventually it'll stop, right? So a small action really produces this amazing kind of note that seems to multiply and fill the air that way, thanks to the sound system, of course, right? A little bit of cheating there, but nevertheless, this is interesting, isn't it, how this works? And the divine principle mentions it this way. It says, like the air that enables two tuning forks, it's probably talking about the resonance between two, because if you strike one and they're the right distance apart, the other one will start vibrating and sound sympathetically as well. Or it could be meaning just the two prongs of one fork. The debate is open on that one, right? So they resonate with each other. A true person acts as the mediator and center of harmony between the two worlds. The ability to communicate between the two worlds can also be likened to a radio or a television, which transforms invisible waves into perceptible images and sounds. So, thus a person can accurately convey the realities of the spirit world to the physical world. So there's this process of resonance. There's a person, man or woman, who's in the spiritual world and in the physical world at the same time. We're living in two worlds, and we should act like the air when a tuning fork is struck and allows these two worlds to do that, right? So this is kind of resonance. And Father uses this word quite a lot to describe even the way that our spiritual senses work, so that when you have this kind of resonance with the spirit world, then your sensation, the way that your spiritual eyes perceive, get kind of communicating and relating with the way that your physical eyes receive. So you see things, you see them, you use the same language. I saw a vision, right? And it's actually your spiritual eyes resonating with your physical senses in that way. So when we put these together, the first four points about temples generally in the academic world and a true person as in the divine principle, it's rather interesting, isn't it, that there's a strong correlation between these two. And really it shouldn't be surprising, I think, because, as was already revealed, the tabernacle or the temple is a symbolic Messiah. And actually, sometimes the word symbolic is underrated, I think. Right? We tend to use it in English language like, oh, it was just a symbolic gesture. It means it wasn't so important. But in religion, it's very important, because if you can do something in symbol, then it includes everything which is going to come in the future, or it has the meaning of everything contained within it. So we can say the tabernacle and the temple, yes, they're a symbolic or image Messiah, but not just a kind of looks like or but works in the same way. They have a similar function. So the way that sacred space works is the way that the Messiah works, although the Messiah is much more substantial and much more free to do other things and to give the word of God and to give much more, right? So how much more should the devotion we have for our physical temple, be transferred to the Messiah and his bride when they come? Here is a little reference to the kind of way in which the temple was defiled. And at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, not only did it go dark for 3 hours, you know the story, which might have been an eclipse, of course, but even so, it's uncanny and eerie when the sky goes dark in the middle of the day. But also, at that moment, the curtain of the temple, that curtain which divided the most holy place from the holy place, it was ripped in two. Shocking, because nobody was meant to see inside that most holy place. Only the high priest could go, and he could go in there once a year. And you know that they tied a rope around his ankle Why would that be? Because God forbid he died when he was in there, people could pull him out, right? They didn't have to go in to get him. So this was the kind of feeling that people had that, if you go in there, you're going to be face to face with God. You're in God's presence, right? So we don't want to be in God's presence if we have no right to be, right? It's very uncomfortable, right? So how to make ourselves really, straighten out our lives, right? Really, we have to be as straight as a tuning fork, right? And I think it's a good analogy because, if one is representing God and this other one is representing man in God's image, then you can imagine that this would produce no sound if one of these was bent like this, right? So when we're not in that proper alignment, there can be no resonance. It's not going to work. It's not any judgment from God to us. It's just it doesn't work. We have to put effort into putting our spiritual lives right and being in God's image. So finally, this was the temple and all that's left of it today, right? So if you go to Jerusalem, some of you might have been on one of the MEPI tours, like I had the privilege to be, amazing. And I went straight to the wall and wanted to offer a prayer. I was stopped by security guards, actually, right? And they asked me one question. They said, "Are you Jewish?" I didn't know what to answer, so I just said, "My name is Hanna," and they let me through. So no untruth was told, right? So there you go. The tradition is that the Spirit of God left the temple through this holy wall, and that's where we go to pray, and one day it'll be restored. Well, we have our own kind of restoration of the temple going on. This is H.J. Chonwon in Cheongpyeong area, right? And full of people, always new buildings. We saw today some new things opening up, even a new marina and electric boat and all kinds of things. So becoming a very wonderful place, and True Mother really wants to make it a beautiful place for people to enjoy. And, that's important in every way, best coffee shops, best restaurants, best kind of, fun on the lake, sculpture gardens, arboretums, a museum about True Parents' life, of course, this is important. When I was there last year, that I was really puzzling, why is this being built, this Chonwon-gung, this big temple? And I thought, well, the best thing to do is just to pray and ask God, what's the reason? And the answer that I got for myself at that time, I don't say it's the answer, but what I got was I saw Cheongpyeong here like this, but it was full of people in bright Korean dresses, and I could see in this vision, these were the kind of slightly shorter dresses on the women, which are characteristic of North Korea. This is North Korea, actually. This is the kind of Cheongpyeong area in Pyongyang, right? So always busy on these special days. And I saw like the Cheongpyeong area full of what obviously to me were North Koreans. And why? Because I thought, well, yes, that's right, isn't it? Sometime that barrier is going to come down. And all those pure-hearted North Koreans who had been so devoted to the wrong parent, right, in the North, will have a great emptiness in their life. And how can they quickly catch what is the legacy of True Parents, especially if True Parents are no longer with us? We hope they will be, hope True Mother will still be there, but if not, how are they going to catch? Will they read a book? I don't think so. Will the Korean government tell them? I don't think so. Will they, sit down and hear a lecture? Some will, but majority won't. No, they need to catch it as a total experience. So I think that's what True Mother is wanting to create there. A kind of total experience. You go there for a day, you come back, right? You really know who your true parents are, and you know something about their life and their investment, and it all comes through these various senses to you, and maybe then you go on to study more. So how wonderful, very quick way. So I feel it's very much for the future rather than for me. And, we've seen very beautiful pictures. We'll see more as we're reporting on things, I'm sure, over the next week. So a very holy place there, just called the Inner Sanctum, and not the Sanctum Sanctorum or the Holy of Holies, but it's there. But sure, we have to be very, pure mind and heart to go there and to experience something. But the potential is there to really experience. So finally, I want to end with just some short quotations from our true parents here. Father said back here, it's in the Pyeonghwa Gyeong, if you live a life of sincere prayer and devotion, for 3 to 5 years, you can liberate your mind from the body's horizontal and habitual influence. Oh, that's a bit of judgment, certainly to me, right? 3 to 5 years? What have I been doing all this time, right? Yeah, that means it's possible to do that if you're serious about it. When you go to the repair shop, and Father often referred to, religion as the repair shop, you cannot stay there forever. You need to come out reborn. While the religious life is the required course for all humankind, it's not the basic purpose or the whole purpose of life. We have to get off this kind of wheel, as it were, and we have to really leave that old, imperfect life behind. From now on, people will gradually come to perceive God and to understand the spirit world and the works of spirit people. People will become conscious of their internal person, their spirit self, and their spirituality will develop. I think Father's not talking about church members here. He's talking about everybody, right? This is going to happen for humankind. This is going to happen. And gradually people, either they know what's happening or they don't. It's all God's plan and God's work. And maybe more applicable to us in this 40 days, Father said, people who change their character to fit the way of heaven are the true people of God's hope.
Thank you, Reverend David Hanna, for that wonderful message. Let's take a few minutes now to reflect on the message before we have our offering song.